Have you ever sat alone in your house and heard footsteps that weren't yours? Not loud, just soft, like paws on hardwood floors. A sound you haven't heard in months, but one your soul remembers. Maybe it was late at night. You were reading or drifting to sleep, when suddenly you felt the weight, the same soft thump on your bed, the warm press against your feet, like they'd always done before. You sat up, looked around, nothing there, no fur, no shadow, but your heart was pounding like it knew, because it did. Some say it's just memory, just grief, but what if it's not? What if? Dogs remember more than we think. What if they come back? Edgar Cayce believed they do, not in theory, not in metaphor, but in soul. And once you hear what he said, you may never look into your dog's eyes the same way again. Her name was Elise. For 12 years, her golden lab, Jasper, had been her shadow. Through breakups, surgeries, and the loss of her father, he was always there, never asking, never judging, only present. Every morning, he would wait by the door the moment her alarm rang. Every night, he'd curl up at the foot of her bed, pressing his body gently against her ankles, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. When Jasper passed, it wasn't sudden, but that didn't make it easier. The house felt cold, empty. Her world had shape, but no warmth. She couldn't even bring herself to move his bowl. 3 months later, after much hesitation, she adopted another lab from a nearby rescue. Different color, younger, different name Leo. But on the second night, something happened. Elise had just turned off the lights when she felt it, that same warm weight at her feet. Not similar, identical. The pressure, the stillness, the calm that settled into her chest without explanation. She flicked on the light. Leo was lying across the bed, eyes open, staring at her. Not playfully, not curiously, but as if he recognized her. From that moment on, Leo repeated Jasper's old patterns, waiting by the door at 7:02 every morning, nudging open the cabinet where Jasper's leash used to be, sitting in the exact same spot during her yoga sessions, even barking at the same rusted wind chime Jasper always reacted to. Elise wasn't looking for signs. She hadn't been convinced by stories of reincarnation. But she said one night, half asleep, she whispered, "If it's you, thank you for finding me again." Leo didn't bark. He didn't move. But she swears he sighed, deep and slow. And in that silence, her grief didn't vanish. It softened. Maybe you felt it too, that strange flicker of recognition in your dog's eyes, like they knew you before you ever met. Maybe it was the way they ran straight to you at the shelter, bypassing everyone else. Or how they always seemed to find you in your hardest moments without being called, not with words, but with presence. Some things defy explanation, but they don't need to be explained to be real. So I want to ask you something personal. Has your dog ever done something that made you pause? Something that felt too familiar to be chance a glance, a habit, a dream that lingered long after you woke up? If so, you're not alone. These moments aren't just stories, they're echoes. And I invite you to share one below, not for debate, not even for proof, but because someone else might be silently waiting for permission to believe. Your memory could be the light they need to finally say, "I've felt that too." Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, gave over 14,000 psychic readings in his lifetime, covering everything from health to the afterlife. But among his most quietly profound revelations was something few expected: his belief that animals too have souls. Not just instincts, not just patterns of behavior, but spiritual essence. According to Cayce, animals exist within what he called a group soul consciousness, a shared energetic field where their memories, emotions, and awareness are woven together like threads in a single tapestry. Unlike humans, who are born with distinct individual souls, animals, he said, begin within a collective spirit, moving as one, feeling as one, loving as one. And yet, Cayce also revealed something even more astonishing: that deep love, true, selfless, consistent love could spark something new. He believed that when an animal forms a powerful emotional bond with a human, something begins to shift. The group's soul begins to individualize. In other words, the love they give and receive can create a unique imprint, a soul that begins to remember. He described it as a spiritual awakening of sorts, not in a human way, but in a soul way, through loyalty, shared life, mutual care. The animal becomes more than a reflection of our love. They become a conscious companion of it. This, he said, is why some pets return not randomly, not as new beings, but as a continuation of the connection that once was. They don't just remember the sound of your voice or the smell of your clothes, they remember you, your essence, your soul. And when they find you again, it's not by chance. It's reunion. It's soul recognition. And in Cayce's view, this isn't sentiment, it's sacred design. Because love, he said, is never wasted. It always finds its way home. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt something ancient staring back, something deeper than affection, something almost remembering you're not imagining it. According to Edgar Cayce, the evolution of the soul doesn't begin or end with the human form. He taught that all of life moves through an ongoing process of spiritual awakening, and animals, especially those closest to us, are part of that journey. While most animals begin within what he called a group soul, some begin to step beyond it, not through time or training, but through love, through shared experience, through suffering, loyalty, sacrifice, and connection. Cayce said that when an animal gives itself over to a human in true companionship, not out of training or reward, but from choice, something changes. A flicker of individuality begins to form. They begin to remember not through logic, but through resonance, energy, presence. That's why your dog might know your mood before you speak, or why they sit by your side when words won't come. They feel who you are, not just what you do. And with each bond, each shared lifetime, that soul grows. It evolves. It begins to carry memory across time, not memory of tricks or treats, but memory of connection, memory of your soul's fingerprint. Cayce believed that in some rare cases, this individualization grows strong enough to carry the animal from one life to the next, drawn back to the one soul it loved most, you. So, when your new dog curls up in the exact same place the last one did, when they give you that familiar look you thought you'd never see again, maybe it isn't coincidence. Maybe it's the next chapter in a very old story, one that started not with training, but with trust, and continues not because of habit, but because love, true love, has a memory all its own. If souls are eternal, then perhaps some recognize one another across lifetimes, not by face or form, but by presence. Edgar Cayce believed that dogs, when bonded deeply with a human, don't just fade into the collective soul field when they pass, they remember, they carry something forward. In his readings, Cayce described cases where a dog's love for a person had grown so powerful, so spiritually refined, that it created an energetic thread, a soul connection that would endure beyond death. In these rare but meaningful cases, the dog would reincarnate not as something entirely new, but as a familiar presence in a different body, drawn back by a kind of spiritual gravity toward the one soul they knew best. He called this a soul contract, not written in language, but in love. A silent agreement formed not with words, but through companionship, protection, shared heartbreak, and deep, unconditional presence. There's the story of a child who lost her shepherd mix after a long illness. 2 years later, a stray showed up at her school, same eyes, same instinctive lean against her leg, same habit of circling once before lying down, a behavior unique to her previous dog, or the man who adopted a rescue hound after the death of his old companion, only to discover that the new dog flinched at the exact same sound, reacted to the same friends, and found the same hidden toy buried under the porch, something he'd never shown or taught. He didn't believe in reincarnation, not then. But when that dog curled up in his lap one night, breathed against his chest the same way the other used to, he said the grief broke open and something else slipped in peace. According to Cayce, these aren't isolated anomalies. They're threads of continuity. In rare cases, when love between a human and a dog is profound enough, it imprints on the soul level, becoming a beacon, a signal that can guide a soul back across lifetimes, not just for comfort, but for completion. Because the bond wasn't finished, because the healing wasn't over, because the love had more to give. So when you find yourself wondering why your new dog feels old, why they already know you, why they sleep by your bed like they've done it 1,000 times before, maybe it's not their first time. Maybe your paths were always meant to cross again, not by accident, but by design. A sacred reunion written long before either of you arrived in this life. Long before Edgar Cayce ever spoke of the soul's journey. Long before Western psychology asked whether dogs could remember or grieve. Ancient traditions around the world were already whispering the same truth. Animals are not lesser. They are not separate. They are soul companions walking beside us through lifetimes. In Hinduism, the soul called Atman is eternal. It moves through a cycle of births and rebirths, learning, evolving, shedding form after form in pursuit of liberation. A soul may take birth as a child in one life, a dog in another, a bird perched on a windowsill in the next. This isn't seen as a punishment, but as a necessary evolution, each life carrying its own sacred lesson. Some believe that animals who live in close contact with humans, especially those who love and serve with loyalty, may be on the cusp of human birth, or may return to fulfill an unfinished bond. So, when your dog looks at you with a gaze that feels older than their body, wiser than their age, maybe they are. Maybe they've been here before. In Buddhism, the idea of sentient beings extends far beyond humans. It includes every creature capable of feeling pain, joy, and connection. All sentient beings are said to carry the spark of Buddha nature, the seed of enlightenment that exists in every living form, even the smallest insect. To harm an animal is to delay that awakening. To love one is to participate in the unfolding of compassion. Some monks tell stories of animals that return again and again to the same temple, to the same people, as if drawn by invisible threads. And when you sit in silence, breathing slowly, with your dog resting beside you, heartbeats aligned, that too is a form of meditation, a union of souls beyond language. Among Native American traditions, animals are not seen as mere creatures, but as teachers, messengers, and spirit guides. Each animal carries a symbolic role. The bear brings strength, the deer offers gentleness, the owl brings wisdom, and the dog, often associated with protection and loyalty, is revered as a guardian between worlds. To dream of a dog after its passing is not dismissed as grief, it is honored as communication. When a dog appears unexpectedly in life or in vision, it may be the spirit of one who walked with you before, returning to remind you of the strength you forgot you had. For many tribes, the natural world and the spiritual world are not separate realms but one interwoven reality. So, if a dog returns to your life in a moment of despair or transformation, it is not random, it is sacred. Across cultures, across continents, across centuries, the message repeats like a quiet heartbeat. Animals are not beneath us. They are beside us. They carry memory. They carry meaning. And some of them, especially those who've walked with us through pain, through change, through growth, they carry soul. The same soul that may come back again and again until the lesson is complete or the love has been fully expressed. So when your new dog behaves like an old friend, when they find your hand in the dark or follow you without being taught, maybe it's not instinct, maybe it's memory, maybe it's homecoming. For years, science dismissed what the heart already knew. It told us that animals acted on instinct, nothing more. That dogs responded to tone, to routine, to food. But not to us, not to our essence, not to something as unmeasurable as love. And yet, quietly, that story has started to shift. Across labs, journals, and behavioral studies, a new truth is emerging, not whispered, but recorded. Cognitive ethologists, biologists, and psychologists are beginning to recognize what spiritual traditions have said all along. Animals feel, they grieve, they remember, they dream. Elephants have been documented returning to the bones of their dead, brushing tusks against them in reverence. Dogs have been observed sleeping beside graves for days, even weeks, refusing food, refusing comfort. Cats meow into the void of an empty room, pacing the doorway where someone used to sit. These are not isolated stories, they are patterns, data points. And when the same behaviors arise across species, continents, and cultures, science begins to pay attention. Studies have shown that animals exhibit stress responses that mirror human grief, loss of appetite, social withdrawal, signs of depression. Parrots have been observed holding silent vigils. Primates have cradled the bodies of their deceased. In controlled experiments, dogs have shown physiological distress, elevated heart rate. Stress hormone spikes when their human companions are experiencing sadness, even from miles away. They respond not just to voice or body language, but to something subtler, something energetic. Then there are the dreams. Pet owners across the world, speaking different languages and living in different traditions, have reported vivid encounters in sleep moments where a dog who passed appears again, not like a memory, but like a visitation. The weight at the foot of the bed, the soft bark in the distance, the eyes that meet yours in total silence. These dreams are often so specific, so emotionally powerful, that people wake not with sorrow, but with peace. Some psychologists call this emotional imprinting, the theory that a powerful bond leaves a trace in the subconscious, which re-emerges in sleep. But others suggest something more. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist known for his controversial but compelling work on morphic resonance, has documented cases where dogs appear to know when their humans are coming home, even when arrival times are random, even when no physical cues are available. He proposes that animals are connected to us through fields of intention, through non-local patterns of awareness that science has yet to fully understand. His critics call it fringe. His data says otherwise. And then, there are the anomalies, moments so strange they defy explanation. A dog suddenly sitting up minutes before a phone call announcing a loved one's death. A cat staring at an empty chair on the day its companion passes. A horse becoming restless just before the heartbeat monitor in a hospital room goes flat. Science doesn't have terms for these. It calls them outliers. But the soul calls them something else. Maybe science is just beginning to measure what intuition has always known, that love is not bound by distance, that connection does not end with breath, and that some bonds are strong enough to echo across planes of existence. Maybe we're not imagining these moments. Maybe we're finally starting to listen to them differently, not as superstition, but as a kind of evidence that can't yet be graphed. Because when biology begins to echo what the spirit has always whispered, that animals don't just live with us, they stay with us, in presence, in energy, in memory. We owe it to them to listen, not just with logic, but with reverence. What if it wasn't you who chose them? What if, in a way your mind couldn't see, but your heart always felt, they chose you, not just once, but again? What if the dog lying at your feet right now, or the one whose collar you still keep in a drawer, was never a coincidence, never a random adoption or a lucky match, but part of something older, something written not in time, but in soul? We often think of love as something we give, something we offer. But what if it's also a compass? One that draws souls back together across lifetimes, across bodies, across silence. Maybe that look they gave you, the one that stopped you in the middle of a hard day, the one that felt like a memory even when it was happening, wasn't just affection. Maybe it was recognition, the wag of a tail at the exact moment you needed hope, the way they pressed against your chest when grief had stolen your voice, the familiar way they curled up in your lap, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. That's not just behavior, that's knowing. That's a soul remembering its assignment. Because what if they came back for you not out of duty, not out of instinct, but because you were unfinished, because their love for you wasn't done healing you, because they remembered the sound of your sadness, the shape of your loneliness, and decided again to walk beside you. Maybe they didn't come to teach tricks or fetch balls. Maybe they came back to remind you how to feel, how to trust, how to open the part of your heart that you thought had shut for good. We don't always notice it right away. Sometimes the recognition comes in quiet moments, a scent, a pause, a habit that makes your breath catch. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes it's the moment you say their name out loud without thinking and realize your eyes are wet. It's not logical. It's not scientific, but it's real, because the soul doesn't speak in facts, it speaks in feeling. And when you feel that ache, that warmth, that moment of impossible familiarity, maybe it's not your imagination. Maybe it's a soul that found its way home. Again. So if you've ever looked at your dog and thought, I know you, even though you've never said it aloud, maybe you do. Maybe you always have. And maybe they've always known you too. Maybe this isn't really about proving whether dogs have souls or if reincarnation is real. Maybe it's about something more personal, something quieter, the kind of knowing that doesn't need a name. Because in the end, the soul doesn't ask to be proven. It asks to be felt. And sometimes what we feel in the presence of a dog, whether they're sitting beside us now or long gone, is more sacred than any theory could explain. Maybe that warmth that rises when you think of them isn't just memory. Maybe it's presence. Maybe it's proof of a love that didn't end, it just changed form. And maybe your grief isn't just a wound. Maybe it's a doorway. Because to grieve this deeply means you've loved something pure, something unconditional. And that kind of love leaves an imprint. It weaves itself into the fabric of your life. So if a moment comes when you feel them again in a dream, in a sound, in a sudden wave of calm, when everything else feels chaotic, don't dismiss it. Don't explain it away. Just receive it. Breathe into it. Let it be what it is, a soul reminding you that love never dies. It only transforms. And now, I want to ask you something gently, quietly. If their name just came to mind, if a face or a feeling surfaced as you listened, honor it. Write their name in the comments, not for attention, not for likes, but as a kind of sacred remembering, like lighting a candle in digital form, like saying, you mattered, you're still with me, because someone else may read your story and find their own healing in it. Someone else may have thought they were crazy for feeling the same thing until your words reminded them they weren't alone. This is how healing happens, in shared memory, in honest silence, in small acts of soul-level truth. And if you know someone who's grieving a pet right now, someone who wonders if that presence they feel is real, share this with them. Not to convince, but to comfort. To say, I believe you. Because sometimes the most human thing we can do is listen. And sometimes the most divine thing we can say is, I still feel them. 2. What if we've been looking at it backwards this whole time? What if your dog didn't just come into your life for you to love them, but to love you in the places you didn't even know were hurting? We speak of soulmates in human terms. But some bonds go beyond words, beyond logic, beyond the limits of species. Because maybe your dog didn't return just because you needed them. Maybe they returned because they needed you, not out of neediness, but because their purpose hadn't been fulfilled. Because part of their soul's journey was to help you remember yours. Think about the timing, the way they arrived when you were breaking or lost or silently holding yourself together, the way they seemed to understand your sadness before you could speak it, the way they waited patient, steady, without agenda for you to open back up. That's not just loyalty, that's soul memory, that's sacred recognition. And maybe the truth is, you made a promise long ago, not just to walk together once, but to find each other again, across lives, across forms, across time. We talk about healing like something we do alone, but maybe healing is something we allow. Maybe your dog came back not just to sit beside your wounds, but to show you that even your darkest places were still lovable, that you were still worth staying for. And they did stay, didn't they? Even when you shut down, even when you pushed everyone else away, even when your heart forgot how to trust, they remembered for you. In stillness, in breath, in presence. So maybe you didn't rescue them. Maybe they rescued you. Not in the dramatic sense, not in a single moment, but slowly, subtly, in all the ordinary ways that aren't ordinary at all. And maybe that's the real miracle, not that dogs return, but that they return with healing in their eyes, with wholeness in their paws, with a kind of divine patience that teaches you something about who you were before the world hardened you. If that's true, if your dog's soul has walked beside you through more than one life, then maybe you're not just loving a pet. You're keeping a promise. You're completing a story that began long before you remembered it. And somewhere, deep in the silence of your soul, you've always known they didn't come back to be yours. They came back to remind you that you were never broken. You were always whole. And they always knew the way back to you.